Greetings to Miss Susie, my lecturer, Madam Amira, my supervisor, and my fellow classmates that are currently watching my presentation. So, my name is Aina Sarah, and today I'll be presenting my legal research. The title of my legal research is called Secondary Victimization and Victim Impact Statement Due to the Long Process of Prosecution in Malaysia. So moving on, this is my overview, and moving on to the abstract, which is the research would focusing on the negative impact on the country's long prosecution process on victims. Okay, so it could also lead to secondary victimization and also financial burden, and and usually the victims would feel helpless and lacking in closure because they had to face the trauma, especially during the court proceeding that takes so long to end. So the keywords for my research is victim, mental health, psychological, long prosecution, and justice. Okay, so for the introduction, as we know that the legal proceedings, long or short, can significantly impact the mental health of the victims negatively. It can also impact the victims due to the lengthy court prosecution process that can not only take in a month, but it could also take years. So there are many reasons why the proceedings will be delayed because there are many reasons such as the complexity of the case, the backlog of the cases, because there are a lot of cases to be tried every single day. So as we know that because the victim also involved in the trials, it is important for us to shield the victims from secondary victimization, where in this situation, the harm can arise from the legal process, especially if it takes a long time to be completed. Okay, so because this research was mainly focusing on the victims, it is understood that the delay could occur more than a year, where it could happen in between 2 to 3 years for the case to be resolved. And because of that, a lot of victims felt like as if they are stuck and could never move on from the past and the occurrence of the crime because they feel that um, it is a lack of communication on when the trial can be ended for them to achieve the justice that they've been wanting. Okay, so for the problem statement, there are 5 here where it is important for us to acknowledge the victims feel vulnerable and the victim's condition because it is usually being overlooked by most of the time because as we know the court proceeding mainly focusing on catching the offender and to and the victim's condition is not being properly checked. Okay, so because of that, the court process, it is also for us to understand that the court process that fails to protect the victims adequately usually leave the victims being stuck in and powerless, and it can cause them to mistrust and they would give up on continuing the legal proceeding because sometimes it would take so long for the proceedings to end. And the next problem statement is that we need to understand that despite on the court being delayed, that it is not mainly because of the court itself, because as we know that our country had laws pertaining on how to fasten up the court because and to lowering the backlog of the cases. So we need to look it in other factors such as the law enforcement that usually took so much time to submit the police report. And because of that, it can cause the delay. Okay, so for the fourth one, um, we need to ensure that the victims are supported not only to survive but also to thrive. So because of that, sometimes the long court proceedings, it can cause for the victims to feel stuck, and because of that, we need to provide legal aid so that such as psychiatrists and ways for them to understand the things that could occur during the court proceedings so that they can be even more prepared. And the last one is because of that, many victims reported health concern as a result of proceedings, especially the ones who were representing themselves. And there are even some situation where I have done my research where they stated that because of the long court proceeding, it had caused them to have chronic disease, and that the long court proceeding is so much worse than the crime itself. Okay, so for the next one, this is where my research objective and my research question for me to actually summarize everything that has happened. So for the first one, it is research objective, which is to familiarize with the definition of secondary victimization and victim impact statement. Second is to study the factor of secondary victimization and victim statement impact. And the last one is to analyze the court process and the long court proceeding in Malaysia. And for my research question, there are three too, which is what is the definition of secondary victimization and victim impact statement? What is the factor of secondary victimization and victim impact statement due to the long process of prosecution? And lastly is what is the Malaysia court process and the long court proceeding in Malaysia? Like the exact thing that happened in Malaysia. Okay, so moving on to the scope of research. Um, so as you can see, here are where the points that I have researched for us to understand the scope of my topic. Okay, so the purpose of this study is mainly to focus on the secondary victimization that usually occurs during the long court proceedings. So in this research, it is not only focusing on the victims and what the trauma and the negative impact that occurred to them, but it is also mention the how long how much the long court proceeding affect the victims. Okay, and the victim of the visiting process that shared the various obstacles they encountered while pursuing justice. And also, the scope of research of this topic is to help to enhance the protection and to give suggestion on how to foster the court processes that in order to relieve the victim's suffering. And the next one is this research also tend to widen up this issue to more judiciary system, so that the public can know that and that to ensure that the court proceeding not only focus on the defendants but also focusing on the victims of the crime. And lastly, it is to help assisting the victims throughout the court proceedings so that they can portray even better how the judiciary is fair, and this could gain their trust so that they would not give up for on the trial halfway. Okay, so the significance of research. This is where I will mention the importance and the reason why we need to do this research. Okay, so for the first one is reason. This research mainly identifies the reality of the victim who face lengthy court proceedings. Okay, as we know that it is not something that always has been mentioned by the society itself. So because, but however, it actually occurs towards the victims, especially because most of the time the victims will be affected mentally, because the court proceedings can be harsh, and especially if it takes a long time to complete. Okay, so for the next one, it is the importance of acknowledging. So it is important for us to acknowledge that how the victims affected mentally due to the long court proceeding, and also how it can cause a secondary victimization. So, and other than that, we need to provide support for the victims, as it is crucial for the victims to build trust in the justice system, and it can help the victims to be more confident in seeking assistance, so that this can encourage the victims to not give up. Okay, so backlog of the cases, as we know that backlog of the cases causes the delay of the court. And in this research, also provide the information regarding the backlog of cases itself, and also how can we reduce the backlogs and how to fasten the court proceedings. And the last one is victim impact statement. Okay, so this is one of the um, tool in order to help the victim to utilize their rights, which is for them to get the justice that they deserve. Okay, so for the research methodology, as we can see, my research will be conducted in qualitative-based research, where it is doctrinal, library-based, and theory. And as we know that I have extracted some information from article, journal, news, case study, and more in order to gain more information for this research. And I also had conducted an online interview session with three professionals so that I can actually understand the things that occurs during the court proceedings and why is it taking so long to complete. And also how can we help the victims. Okay, so for the literature review, in my thesis, I have done 10 literature reviews. However, I have breaking down some reviews so that it can, this is are the reviews that is very important so that we can conclude everything. So like the title for the first one is Delays in the Crown Court, Where is the Justice? And the writer is Zain Ahmad. And this is in here, it mentions about the backlog for cases and various issues in the legal system, which is the reason why it is hard to resolve the case as soon as possible. And also, the victims' rights are compromised when justice is delayed. Okay, so the next one is analyzing the adverse effect of delay in the administration of criminal justice system in Pakistan, which is the writer is Sadaqah Ali. And this is where it explained the reasons for prolonged court decision, and it also focused on the impact on victims. This is a very important article because it actually bring everything to the surface so that I can insert it in my thesis. Okay, so for the next one is delay in trials, which is the implications for victim survivors of rape and serious assault, written by Michelle Berman and Una Buxhe. And in this case, it is it focusing on the rape victims. So because some victims might be unable to feel the closure. Okay, so for the last one is Standing with Sexual Crime Victims, written by Prima E. Divaraj. In this article, it is where it mentions about the meaning of secondary victimization and how can we support the victims who feels vulnerable during the long court proceedings. Okay, so for the next one, okay, so the limitation of research, as we know that, of course, everyone that is doing this research will face a few limitations. As for me, it is hard for me to um, find more information because I was afraid that it could be lacking, and the limitation too is that the topic itself is very comprehensive and it is kind of hard to narrow it down, and it is making me feel anxious and I'm afraid that I might feel stuck in the middle of writing it. And the third one is I had to juggle up with other tasks and assignments, and also the submission of the research is on the same date as my exam paper, and it is hard to balance both of these. Okay, so as we know, there are a few chapters that I have done for this topic. Okay, for chapter 2, it is definition of secondary victimization and victim impact statement. This is where I will be explaining the impact on victims and on mental health and impact during the criminal proceedings, and the meaning of victims such as the primary victimization, secondary victimization, and the reasons why the secondary victimization occurred towards the victims. And the third one is what is victim impact statement and why is it created? As we know, it is created to help the victim to voice out the feeling that they felt so that the accused um, can be judged in a fair way and can be punished accordingly. And the fourth one is the general effect of long court proceedings towards the victims. So it is to identify the effect in general towards the victims especially during the long court proceedings. So for the next chapter is chapter 3, the factor of secondary victimization and victim impact statement due to the long process of prosecution. So this is where we will identify the meaning of forms of secondary victimization, factors of secondary due to long court proceedings. This is usually occurs because of the re-traumatization and being questioned over and over by the prosecution, and they had to relive the occurrence and the crime that occurred to them. Okay, so the third one is impacts of secondary victimization towards the victims, and the last one is factors of victim impact statement. Okay, so for chapter 4, this is very crucial as it is a deeper um, research to the Malaysia court process and the long court proceeding in Malaysia. So these are all the lists such as the court proceeding process in Malaysia, where the trials, case management, etc. And when should the trial begin after the case is charged, which is 90 days. However, it doesn't occur as often. And the case law in relation to long court proceedings, like the exact cases that in relation to long court proceedings and length of trial and court outcomes in Malaysia, and the reasons why court is delayed when it comes to the judges, and also the case law regarding victim impact statement so that we can understand better what's the meaning of victim impact statement. And the last one is clearing the backlog of cases and delay. Okay, so for the finding and analysis, based on my research objective and research question, I have made 5 questions, which is question 1, are you aware that every time during the process of the victim impact statement, the victim will face secondary victimization? Question 2, what is the potential for adverse effects such as psychological or financial repercussions experienced by victims due to the lengthy court proceedings? Question 3 is, does all court system actually follow the 90-day starting trial after the accused is caught? Question 4 is, how can we protect the victims from harsh court persecution so they can handle it even though the court is being delayed? And lastly, what is a suggestion for the judiciary system to actually execute the methods of lowering the duration of court proceedings? Okay, so finding and analysis, as we know that I have 3 research questions, and I have 3 respondents that have consented to be interviewed, and the information used in the section was gathered through an online interview. So as a researcher, after all 5 questions have been interviewed, I can say that I agree with the respondent, although it can be contradict from my answer, but I still agree and disagree to the respondents. And also, it is known that all the advocates and solicitors had a different perception, and they have provided with sufficient information and whether the courts was able to follow the 90 days rule and the effect on victims protection and how to execute the methods of lowering the duration of court proceedings. Okay, so the conclusion and recommendation. In conclusion, it is essential for us to understand that most victims, although it is not mentioned much, they will always face negative psychological impacts due to the court delays. And because of that, this research will help in filling in the gaps, and as you can see, a lot of people turn a blind eye to the victims who experience traumatic psychological impact that lasts a long time, resulting in various symptoms. Because of that, I have I have generated some recommendations in order to lowering the court proceeding and how we can help the victims. Okay, so for the first one is, other than policies, the other enforcers such as the non-governmental organization, NGO, can take action to help fasten the court proceedings by distributing works to the people so that they are able to um, fasten the court proceeding. And the next one is, one of the respondents mentioned how implementing artificial intelligence will help make decisions about court sentencing, as it will assist judges with ruling preparation, research, and brief evaluations. The third one is, the NGO can assist in maintaining the databases, entering case detail, and changing status to keep up to date and readily available case information, and this can help to fasten up the court proceeding. And lastly, the non-governmental organization should provide more legal aid to help the victims so that the victims can be prepared to go through the legal system by helping them understand the process and everything and give emotional support for them. I hope that these recommendations can actually help the victims. Okay, these are the references, and that's all from my presentation for today. Thank you so much for your time.